Back in the ye old days of the Sundering, when Malekith and the Dark Elves began their civil war on Ulthuan, Tor Anlek and the kingdom of Nagarythe became a blasted wasteland, pillaged, burned, and blackened in a power struggle that lasted millennia. People of the Shadowlands were forced to fight fire with fire, and grew cold, bitter, and resentful in their eternal war, and that remains true even into modern times. So when the forces of chaos come knocking, it's just another day in paradise. They're used to it by now, and in the Battle Balance and Bug Fix mod, Shadowwalkers of Old Nagarythe are poised to make quite the statement indeed. For the Azure, Alarielle the Radiant leads the charge atop her Great Eagle, while 4 Shadowwalkers stalk in the vanguard. They are quite decent melee combatants with 12 bonus versus infantry, but their real power comes from reworked martial prowess, which starts them out with 25 reload skill and accuracy innately, which will fall to 12 once they drop below half HP. There are 4 of them on this battlefield, 4 regiments of Shadowwalkers, which means they're the core of this army, and so the fate of the elves rests on their shoulders. Overhead is the Everqueen, using a massively reworked spell in Tempest. No longer is it a flying vortex that can only target aerial units, one that was unfortunately nerfed pretty heavily in the switch to Game 3, and I don't see it brought very much anymore, but it's instead a single target cyclone that can affect the ground as well, meaning it is a very effective tool, but expensive one for slowing and damaging goon squads of all kinds, not just those in the air. You see a bunch of guys on horseback and their SEMs, you can target them if they're on the ground. I think the overcast of that is like 22 winds of magic, which is a lot. It can be used kind of like final transmutation to nuke lords and heroes that are running around together. I believe Star of Avalorn healing was also reduced, as was many of the other most powerful healing spells in the game. Won't be able to crunch on that quite as hard. In the rear are the Fireborn, absolutely incredible stats, as befitting their illustrious and arrogant reputation. 4 Spearmen and 3 War Lions of Christ to round out the infantry and mobility departments. For the forces of Nurgle, across the valley and in the shadow of the Tower of Hoeth, fun little mix of happy demons and morbid mortals, Plague Hulk Soul Grinder, 2 Exalted Heroes on steeds, and a Chaos Sorcerer Lord with Fleshy Abundance, Stream of Corruption, and the Crown of Everlasting Conquest for passive solo regen. It's time for Bubos, Phlegm, Blood and Guts, Boils, Bogies, Rots and Pus, and Nurgle has always been able to deliver that in spades. Their invasion force is what I would call a wide build. Lots of Marauders, Nurglings, Poxhounds, easy enough for skirmish troops to tear apart like that. That was nasty, but potentially forcing them to run low on ammo after only killing trash, so High Elves will have to make some decisions on what they want to shoot at because they do not have unlimited ammunition. As their Spearmen, feeling the wrath of that Phlegm Bombardment Cannon, the Marauders of Nurgle being systematically targeted down by all 4 Shadowwalkers, and that's a really effective way to get some chaff off the field. Nurglings by themselves will not fare well against Azure Spearmen. If all the Marauders are torn apart before both armies even make melee contact with each other, that could be pretty disastrous for the forces of the Plague God. Alarielle's flying overhead on the Great Eagle, waiting for an opportunity potentially to cast some Tempest. Really interested to see how that spell performs. And here come the War Lions of Krace and the Dragonborn. But there's one they fear. Foo's Rodar! Gesundheit! There's the first of what will presumably be many Tempests this game, slowing and dealing damage to the Chaos Sorcerer and his entourage. Nice volley from the Shadowwalkers chunking the Poxhounds down. And the Fireborn, protected by their feline companions, will look to retreat before it gets a bit too hot in the kitchen. I like the Fireborn pick here a lot. Flaming Lances are natural counter to healing, which of course Nurgle relies on quite a bit. That and regen. Honestly, an amazing unit versus all Chaos factions, except maybe Slanesh. They also have that flame resist to make them absurdly tanky versus Khorne and Tzeentch as well. And meanwhile, that Phlegm Bombardment Cannon continues to harry and harass the Azure Spears in the back lines and get rid of some of that infantry. I really like that unit for Nurgle. As we've said, I think it's the best of the Soul Grinders in the game, at least as it stands currently. It's going to be a great tool for thinning the herds and, more importantly, stripping away martial prowess from these archers and infantry. Exalted Heroes are being used very aggressively right now into the thick of the Fireborn. Remember, they can also pair up with Curse of the Slug to prevent the Dragon Princes from escaping. That and the poison stacking is going to make it really difficult for those DPs to utilize their mobility to the fullest potential. But meanwhile, really good focus fire coming in from these Shadow Walkers. Exalted Hero bounding in with those super aggressive animations. And the downside of accuracy is that when you aim small, you miss small. The nearby Fireborn just got pin-cushioned. About a dozen arrows to the dome. Those Nagarythe folks sure are a contentious people. Just made an enemy for life. Dragonborn are in the midst of the entire Nurgle army. Poxhounds charging in from the flank to try to pin them in place. And they will do so successfully. Earthblood and the Star of Avalorn to keep those Fireborn in the fight, but not much in the way of AoE spells on Alarielle's kit to help punish this massive Nurgle blob. Fireborn are surviving for now, but the question is, how long can they do so? Certainly buying a lot of time for the Shadow Walkers to continue their arrow rain. Alarielle's actually going into the thick of it as well on top of her Pigeon. Chaos Sorcerer Lord should be fine in that scenario. Just overcast a Fleshy Abundance to keep his own army nice and healed up, and all three single entities in that fight looking quite healthy for the moment. War Lions are being kept online and patrolling around, taking out some of these isolated troops, and the focus fire from the Shadow Walkers continues to be very impressive. Flame Bombardment Cannon racking up quite a lot of kills, and the Soul Grinder is up to 100 now and has not been touched or pressured in any way, and I don't think the High Elves are going to be able to prevent it from firing all of its ammunition, so what they need to do is just not blob up. Keep it spread, keep the skirmish fire coming, and they'll be in decent shape for now as the Shadow Walkers are doing a really good job of targeting the mobility on the Nurgle side. Just saw them get two really good volleys into the Poison Hounds, who have routed off Curse of the Slug on the Dragon Princes, the Fireborn, who have disengaged after a little bit of a rout from the Chaos Sorcerer Lord and the two Exalted Heroes. But they can't escape from this situation. Not with Curse of the Slug, not with that minus 45% slow, and not with the poison stacked on top of that. So as the Exalted Heroes make their way over with their great axes and 450 majority AP weapon strength, it's going to be really difficult for the Fireborn to stay online. Another look at that Star of Avalorn that kept the Dragon Princes in what was a really dangerous scenario for them and really gave the High Elves a lot of time. But do you want to buy time with such an expensive unit, one that would traditionally be an amazing tool in a late game scenario? I guess we'll see if that gambit pays off or not. I will say thus far the Exalted Heroes have been used really well. They've been on the Fireborn's ass for most of the game and really making life difficult for them. But anytime the Nurgle Goon Squad is together and compact in a formation going after those expensive cavalry, they are going to be a prime target for Alarielle and her Tempest. So we're about to see yet another one as the Azure Spears hold the line against a horde of Nurglings. Chaos Sorcerer Lord, Soul Grinder, and the two Exalted Heroes all in a big group. And as the Fireborn die, Cyclone will drop down and hit 4 single entities in a single cast. That is a normal variant, not the overcast version, so it will deal less damage, but a big time slow for all of Nurgle's most important troops and their fodder. Huge volley just came in on the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. That is where that accuracy really comes into play. He's got 100 armor. In vanilla, that volley would not have done anywhere near that much damage, but the extra accuracy from Martial Prowess really giving them huge burst damage. And Nurgle's got to be careful about that. If they can survive for a little bit longer, the Shadow Walkers will be out of ammunition. But if the High Elves play this smart, they won't be firing unless they've got good targets to shoot at. And because they've done such a good job of taking out the Nurgle mobility in the form of those Poxhounds, well, they can be pretty selective in terms of what they fire into. As we just saw, another great volley into the Soul Grinder, and that thing has to back up because another one like that could cause it to crumble out completely. Fleshy Abundance, keeping it topped off for now. Exalted Hero chasing after the Great Eagle and will force Alarielle the Radiant to escape. This time, the volley will miss, and Exalted Hero will escape with pretty much no HP damage whatsoever. Nurgle's fodder's been torn to pieces, but they had a lot more bodies to start with, and so these Marauders and Nurglings are forcing the Azure Spearmen back, and I don't think the High Elf infantry is going to last for very much longer. In the background there, it looks like the War Lions and the Fireborn have all grouped up together and will shower in Alarielle the Everqueen's Gamer Girl bathwater. Big time heal for them. Fireborn only have a few models remaining, but that heal could be enough to strike the killing blow against the forces of the Plague God. Alarielle's third Tempest this game, taking her damage value up past 2,000. And another heal, this time a Fecundity, I think, on the Soul Grinder. No, it's a Fleshy Abundance, so maybe it's Fecundity last time. Either way, heals for the single entity, trying desperately to keep the demon online and survivable, and they need to figure out how to bring these Shadow Walkers to blows, because so far they have been the MVPs of the entire match. They have been amazing. They have systematically taken down single entities. They have done tons of damage to the fodder as well. Fireborn have given them tons of space, and they've been utilized pretty effectively too. But the Shadow Walkers are running low on their ammo count. Some of them are entirely out of ammunition, and they're going to dive into melee, where they have 40 melee attack base. Fireborn have 15 models remaining, up to 143 kills now. Yeah, that heal actually helped them out quite a bit. Alongside the War Lions, they're fighting some Marauders with great weapons. It's going to be a little bit dangerous for them, so yeah, they're going to wisely look to disengage. And I think that's going to be the last volley for the Shadow Walkers, but an impactful one for sure, taking the Soul Grinder down to close to 2,000 health. And this is where the build decisions get really interesting, because it's a great thing that Nurgle has a lot of fodder, nothing super expensive on their front line that the Shadow Walkers could have focused down in the earlier stages. But now, because they have Nurglings and Chaos Marauders, these Shadow Walkers can beat the brakes off of them in melee, which is not all that common to see in Warhammer or really any Total War game. Archers that can not only defend themselves in melee, but utterly devastate their opponents in CQB. But that will be the case here. Neither Nurglings or Chaos Marauders can make much headway against them when they're dealing with 52 melee attack, 40 base, and that plus 12 bonus versus infantry. So as the Shadow Walkers turn to charge in and still have support from the War Lions and the Fireborn Hammer and Aveling from the rear, and yet more Tempest from Alarielle the Radiant, well, this looks like the High Elves are taking a commanding lead in this scenario, but all three single entities for Nurgle, or rather all four, well, three of them are healthy, one of them is not. I think that Soul Grinder is actually about to disappear. It's been really cool to see Tempest used this much and used in this manner. You never get to see it this often because it's always so niche. It's only against aerials in the aerial troops in the base game. But now targeting these foot troops, Soul Grinder, Flame Bombardment Cannon will disappear back into the void, and that is a big loss for the armies of the Plague God, who are now pretty much solely reliant on that Chaos Sorcerer Lord and the two Exalted Heroes. But Stream of Corruption is a hugely impactful spell in these kind of situations, because the High Elves lack punch now. They don't have their Fireborn anymore. The War Lions aren't going to be around for too much longer if they're engaged in melee with Exalted Heroes. And so to grind down these heavily armored single entities for Nurgle, High Elves have to go into melee to support Alarielle the Everqueen, who's really the majority of the AP remaining on the High Elves side. As they pile in to limit the mobility of these single entities, the Lords and Heroes, well, that makes them a big-time target for the wave clear spells like Stream of Corruption, which is great versus armor because it's, I think, 100% AP, but it's great versus low armors. It's pretty much great versus all infantry in the game. Really hard to dodge. It just hurts. It hurts a lot. So they can't get too blobby here because those overcast Streams of Corruption are going to be super painful. You'll notice the balance bar isn't really very much in favor of either side at the moment, maybe slightly in favor of the Azure. If they lose their Chaos Sorcerer Lord here with that attack from the Great Eagle, really good RKO from behind and break it off, then the High Elves are going to be smart enough to run that Sorcerer Lord down to the edges of the map. That will leave the Exalted Heroes without any more healing or any more support at all. But they are very high armor, they are powerful melee combatants, and there's not a lot of armor piercing left on the High Elf side. So I think that might be the end of this Sorcerer Lord. We see the Pigeon run it towards the edges of the map. Now, two Exalted Heroes stuck in a massive melee scrum. War Kitties champing at the bit. And Shadow Walkers doing whatever they can to shank these Nurgle Exalted Heroes down. They're, what, 110 armor, 120 armor? Super hard to kill. 44 HP on the Sorcerer. Yeah, we are not going to see this. We're not going to see him return. We are going to see a nice little Fast and Furious car chase. Trying desperately to escape. He's shattered anyway, so it doesn't matter if Larry lands the killing blow or not, but kind of hilarious to see it just waddle after the after the mount. And as soon as that Nurgle Lord shattered, big swing on the balance of power. I don't know that Alarielle needs to keep that chase going, though. Again, it's shattered, so killing it, I don't think, provides any additional morale boost. I could be incorrect about that, but I don't think I am. Here, it's both Exalted Heroes fighting back-to-back, and they're going to be able to deal with the remainder of this High Elf infantry. One unit of Marauders have returned, and that's probably enough cushion for the Forces of Nurgle to win this fight. Shadow Walkers will be able to tear through the Nurgle infantry no problem, but again, they cannot scratch the armor of these Exalted Heroes, and every time they swing those armor-piercing axes, it's 3 or 4 more Shadow Walkers dead. And they're going to start losing their martial prowess if they haven't already. Yeah, they're actually down past the 25% HP threshold, so I don't believe they have any more benefit stat bonus whatsoever. So while they will certainly slaughter their way through these Nurgle Marauders, they still cannot scratch these Exalted Heroes. But here comes Larry on her Great Eagle, and 1 or 2 attacks in the rear could maybe do enough to start swinging things back in the High Elf's favor. Curse the Slug for the slow, but that's really not going to be beneficial in any way. They're not trying to disengage. If it hits Alarielle and she tries to run, maybe that's helpful, but the infantry wants to stay in. They have to. It's the only way they can provide Alarielle the help she needs, because in a 1v1, I don't expect she'll be able to take on an Exalted Hero, at least not in this kind of situation. Oh, and she got another Exalted Hero. Yeah, we're going to go into double fast forward here, just because it's going to take a while, and I don't think you guys want to see Alarielle chase this thing all the way to the edges of the map. She's making the smart play, needs to get rid of that single entity, because if they both come back and team up against the Great Eagle, there's no way she wins. But now, it's about 75-25 on the balance of power in favor of the High Elves. Not sure I agree with that, though. It's taking a lot of her spellcasting into consideration here, and her overall cost. This was a stripped down Exalted Hero, gonna be much less expensive than Alarielle, but at the same time, Larry can't cast anymore. She's been out of Winds of Magic for a while, and Exalted Heroes are really good single entity duelists. It's actually the best duelist of all the Chaos characters in the Champions of Chaos DLC, not counting the Legendary Lords, of course. Now, the Exalted Hero is taking a lead at the start of this duel, landed 2 or 3 attacks, and has dropped Alarielle down past half. But remember that Alarielle's no slouch on her Great Eagle either. She's got a lot of armor piercing, and every time the Nurgle character doesn't land an attack and that poison debuff wears off, she's back to full stats again, which means she hits really hard. Now poison is affecting her once more, but this could go either way, honestly. Alarielle definitely has a decent chance to win this duel. It's basically going to come down to RNG and the slight stat differences between them. Going to go back into fast forward for a little bit longer here. 1,800 health on the Exalted Hero, 1,600 on Alarielle the Radiant, so only about 150 or so separating them, and this is just going to come down to combat rolls. They're being nice and friendly to each other, not doing the Psycho Charge thing with the Pigeon. That's because there's no other foot troops on the field. If there was another Shadow Walker also helping out, he could freely disengage, but by tournament rules, you're not allowed to disengage and Psycho Charge with flyers if they're the only thing left on the map, and that is going to be the reason that Alarielle the Radiant falls here. And frankly, we would have been watching for 5 or 6 minutes as they tried to do their little dance of death, and that probably wouldn't have been that much fun to watch anyway. So good on them to stick in with a duel at the end. Alarielle did maybe get a little bit unlucky. She didn't hit that Exalted Hero for a while in the end game there. A couple more lucky rolls, and I mean, I think at one point that Exalted Hero was down to like 16 leadership. So literally one hit there would have been enough to rout him off. So crazy, crazy ending to that one. And Alarielle, 4,000 damage value. But the Shadow Walkers were MVPs, no question in my mind. All of them, 1,400 value. Did great damage to the Soul Grinder, to the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, and to the fodder on the Nurgle side. One of the Exalted Heroes for BBB strat game got 3,000 damage value himself. That's the one that was fighting Alarielle in the end game. And really interesting strats from both players. That was a really fun one and a very exciting ending. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Plenty more content coming, and I will see you all in the next one. GG to both players. Peace out.